Stephanie, tell us about yourself and what motivated you to run for the Arizona State Legislature.
I am a mechanical engineer, and I've had a couple of businesses in my life. One was young, I had a bike shop, and the other was an engineering firm. And so my years in my career, I was mostly in the energy research field. And then I had a 100-person, 120 sometimes, architectural engineering firm. And it was all consuming. And then, so I retired early. I was able to sell it and retire early, which was wonderful. And then what made me decide to run for office was you have all that experience, those experiences, those skills, and you just still kind of want to be useful. And I also have a nonprofit helping communities with energy. We did a nuclear energy study for a tribal community. We've done do a ton of geothermal. I'm head of a geothermal consortium. And so some of those things, as well as just business and economics, have always been a big thing for me. So those are some of the main things that made me run. The other issue has to do more with just kind of like to see us have more progress in our legislature and less division and having a hard time getting to solutions that actually help most Arizonans.
Okay. What professional or personal experiences best prepare you to represent the business community in Gilbert and the East Valley?
As far as the business community, I would say it's probably my small business experience and the growth and the experience with regulatory issues, the experience with employment issues, the understanding of what it's like to own a business and take care of your employees, suffer the ups and the downs. I think that is probably my most useful experience to the business community. But I also believe my experience with energy and water, they're just huge right now, and they're going to get huger. They're going to get larger. So that's the other, some of the main experience that I think will add.
Okay. Arizona has built a reputation as a pro-business state. What policies do you believe are most important to maintain Arizona's economic competitiveness and ensure that businesses continue to invest and create jobs in Gilbert and throughout the state?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I think there's always a balance on, business friendly versus, what's happening in the broader economy. Do our kids have the ability to, get good jobs where we live? And so I think to support businesses, we just need to be sure that we balance out needs as well as we can. So sometimes I think also it's easy at a legislative level or a federal level to pass something that seems like that would be beneficial to one group or another and not balance those out. I think it's also our job in the legislature to have very thoughtful legislation, that we're speaking with the different communities, that we know what's happening to the businesses in each of our towns and each of our communities. The rural are just as important as, even though I'm here to represent Gilbert, but it's all important to understand. And if we pass a law and a regulation, what does that do? Does that give stability to businesses? Does that help them provide good jobs? Or does that, hurt them? Is it going to hurt their pricing? Is it going to hurt their tax structure? Things like that.
Hi, Stephanie. What role should the legislature play in strengthening workforce pipelines through K-12 education, community colleges, universities, and career training programs?
Yeah, that is one of the areas that I'm beginning to work on and want to work on strongly because I've seen it work. We need to be able to, I think, get a closer relationship between the industries and the businesses here in Arizona. So what is it that they need? The continuing education, the crossover classes that you can take in high school that apply toward community college, whether it's to become an electrician or an engineer or a nurse. I think it's really, really important we create that opportunity. And I personally, I don't think school is just about getting a job. I think it's about, that growth that we all have when we're young. And there's social aspects, you make friends, you do all that. But if we don't also include this, what jobs our kids have and what does industry need, it hurts our kids, it hurts our towns, it hurts the state, and it hurts industry and the businesses.
What role should the state play in supporting transportation and water infrastructure and other key systems necessary for continued business growth?
Yeah, we've had this issue in Gilbert with the water rates rising, and I think obviously that's going to happen everywhere. And some of that is obviously not something that we could or should control in the legislature, but our job in the legislature is to try to make sure that we gain access to water, that we have enough water supply, and that we manage it well. So sometimes that's going to be investments in like reclaimed water systems, efficiencies. I think we also need to take a close look and work with industries that are high water users, and high energy users, frankly, too, and be sure that even if they can afford it, that they're implementing proper procedures to maintain. I mean, water's a public resource, and the legislature, I think, has a role to support that. There's stuff the feds do, and there's stuff that municipalities do, but we need to be sure that we're providing whatever we can to support our local resources.
Building on that topic a bit more, would you please provide a specific transportation or infrastructure project that you feel is important to our community?
I skipped transportation, and I would say too, there's obviously local transportation issues, but I think this is my observation. I have seen in highway and transportation issues way too much construction going on when nothing is happening. And it slows down traffic for people. It slows down traffic for businesses. It lengthens commutes. It makes people less likely to be able to live in locations like Gilbert. And so transportation wise, I think we need to take a closer look at the procurement system and make sure that we're balancing out. We're not just going for, you want the lowest price you can. We're paying for taxpayers, but we want it to last a long time. And we need to not have roads shut down for 3 years. It'll drive by and there's nobody there for month after month. And I think it's got to be a procurement process issue to where we need to. And so I think we need to look more closely at that for transportation. And I think your other question was infrastructure. In the legislature, the things that I want to see I'm most focused on, frankly, is energy. Water also. It's like water is everybody's mind right now, but energy is, they're intrinsically tied. There is no way to have, one without the other. And so I think right now we don't have a Senate. We do have a committee, but it's energy and water are a little bit too tied in with everything else. I personally think that we need to pull that out. I think we need to look closer at AI and other water and energy heavy industries. And so one of the things I want to start doing early, and you can't do too much until you're elected, but I want to start working, across the aisle everywhere with people that have that same concern and saying, instead of 2,000 bills going into the legislature and 10 on each topic, like, let's start working together now so we can get a rock solid one early. So when we go in, we can pass some legislation that actually helps with the water and the energy infrastructure issues. Again, sometimes that's going to be investments. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit of guardrails around water heavy industries. If they're using about the same amount as other industry, that's one thing. But we've got some new ones that use an awful lot. And there are technical solutions to that. And one of the things I look at is always like closed water loop systems. There's nothing that is zero water, but for example, a good data center, you've got good players that will put in their own energy infrastructure. They, at least to some degree, they'll put in water controls and recycle water. But if we don't require that at some level and encourage that, what happens is the bad actors get to play on an even playing field with the good ones. And so I think it helps all of the industry and it helps all the other businesses to not allow, some to be a little, too receptive of good water and energy prices.
Thank you. Next topic, housing. When it comes to housing availability and workforce housing, what policies, if any, should the state consider instating to improve housing supply while maintaining appropriate roles for local communities in planning and zoning decisions?
Yeah, I'd love to be able to say policy X to some of these questions, But again, I think there's different approaches to different things. So I'm going to stay a little bit more philosophically on like my vision of what I would like to have us do, and who I'll pursue working with on what policies specifically. But on housing, I always feel this tug of war. If you're a homeowner and your house value is really high, it is uncomfortable when a lot of apartments get built. But we also need places for people that can't afford a house yet, our kids, whoever, to be able to live and work in our communities. But I think we get a little too polarized in thinking that it's my large house or a tiny apartment. I don't think we're encouraging enough housing that is the somewhere in between. So, if you can afford to buy a condo, you should buy a condo first, and then you invest, and then you're into that market to where you can continue to go up. So I think there's a need for all across the board housing, but we do have to evaluate, like, what does that do to housing prices, but also have we priced out to where young people can't afford to live in our communities. And for me, I believe that most of that answer is going to lie in us encouraging the in-between kind of housing. I bet there's a real term for it that I just don't know yet. But I think about condos, I think about duplexes. I think about some of the communities. We actually have some really great looking communities that have been developed that take into account what they look like, so that it doesn't feel like we become just a town of 1 million apartments, which nobody wants. That doesn't benefit anybody.
Well, thank you. We have about 10 minutes left. So at the end of the day, how would you view the balance between state authority and local decision making when it comes to economic development, housing, and business regulation?
Well, to a large degree, I think it's our job to stay out of your way for municipalities, to give you, or to local communities, really to give the ability to, especially if it's, there's like health and safety things, that belong. But then there are some things that do have to belong at the legislature. And again, I think our biggest thing is just to be really conscious of where that line is, and to not overstep our bounds in a legislative role to where we're stepping into authorities that really doesn't belong to us. I also think it's our job to give stability. I think it's our job to look at things and, like, where would investments in different areas be really beneficial to everybody. You have to be careful not to, it's not a giveaway to everybody. I mean, it's taxpayer money. We have to be super careful, but we all know that, the taxing is to be taken really seriously. If you overtax, you hurt everybody. But if you don't turn around and invest in certain things, infrastructure, roads, you've also hurt us.
Well, let me ask you this. Can you share a specific issue you hope to champion when it comes to the balance between local and state?
Ooh, between the balance between local and state. I'm personally a little bothered by pulling the apartment tax, even though I know there's two sides to that story. That I felt like pulling the apartment tax back to the state level, even if the state budget needed it, I think it created some instability for not just Gilbert, but other communities. And then all of a sudden there's a big hole in the budget that nobody predicted. And then the towns have to figure out how to raise that income. So that's one that I don't know if we can pull that one back or not, but I kind of like to. I also, again, I think for me, the energy issue and the water issue is going to be huge, I think. And I don't think the local communities can establish everything that they would need to do. I think at the state level, we need to set up some infrastructure and some things that help all of the individual communities be able to, have the water they need and have the energy they need. And I think those are the two main areas for me.
That leads into the next question. What role should the legislative play in supporting responsible water management while ensuring that communities like Gilbert can continue to attract businesses and residents?
I think we need to work a little bit more with the federal issues as well, with the federal government. We need to secure water. We need to help secure water resources, whatever that might take. And again, I believe that energy and water are so intrinsically tied that we need to do both. And And so a lot of times I think it is encouraging conservation of those resources for heavy users, especially. I think it's investing sometimes in the infrastructure. Um, you can't have one town that has spent a lot on something. I actually saw this in the hometown I grew up in, which was the main town would spend all the money on all the parks, and then the small towns outside would do nothing and then come in. And you have to be able to kind of share. Communities need some baseline, even though every community is not the same. And I think it is the legislature's job to look out for all of those communities, but not to overrun it, not to overstep our bounds.
Well, and our last question. What is one policy issue affecting Arizona business community that you believe the legislator should prioritize over the next 2 years?
Oh, I absolutely believe it's water energy. I know that's two. I'm going to cheat, but I just, they're so, to me, it's 100% that. And really, I know you only asked one, but number three, I still think education. I think this getting our kids, we've got a few issues with how do we do the education system. And I think that's a debate also. But the thing that's not a debate to me is integrating in businesses and industry a little bit better so that our kids come out more prepared for the jobs that are needed. AI is going to change that too. I think sometimes the statements are overblown about how much I don't know. We'll see. But I think we need to be thinking consciously, like a step ahead. I played sports growing up. And again, it's about where the ball is going to be passed, not where it is at the moment. And I'm a big proponent that we're just not getting ahead of that ball as often as we should in energy, water, and a little bit education for industry and just in general.